She wanted love. She wanted security. She wanted the life she believed she deserved, even if she had to manipulate her way into it. But on the second week of her marriage, her new husband walked into a truth so humiliating, so intimate, so permanent, that it shattered everything he thought he could build with her. A tattoo, but not just any tattoo. A heart drawn across her chest, and another one near her most private part, both carrying the same cryptic initials, HB. He thought it meant heartbeat, but when her phone chimed and he discovered a message that shocked to the core. 48 hours after that, only one person walked out of the house alive. Welcome to True Crime Story HQ. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay tuned for daily true crime updates. Don't forget to subscribe. Leslie Pope was 34 years old when she realized her entire strategy was falling apart. For 7 years, she'd been with Henry Brandon. 7 years of her life wrapped around a man who made her feel things she'd never felt before. It wasn't just love. It was something deeper. Something that made her check her phone every 5 minutes waiting for his texts. Something that made her cancel plans with friends just to be available when he called. Henry was a construction worker. He woke up at 5 in the morning, worked 12-hour shifts, and came home exhausted. He didn't make a lot of money. He couldn't buy her the things she wanted. He couldn't take her to expensive restaurants or surprise her with designer bags. But none of that mattered to Leslie in the beginning. What mattered was the way he looked at her, the way he laughed at her jokes, the way he made her feel like she was the only woman in the world when they were together. Henry had this energy about him. Confident, but not arrogant. Strong, but not controlling. He was exactly the kind of man Leslie thought she'd spend the rest of her life with. And the sex. The sex was incredible. Henry knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't rough, but he wasn't gentle either. He paid attention to what she liked. He made her feel wanted in a way no one else ever had. After 7 years, that chemistry never faded. Every time they were together, it felt electric. Leslie was obsessed with him. Completely. Totally. The kind of obsession that made her rearrange her entire life around his schedule. The kind that made her ignore red flags because she couldn't imagine life without him. But Henry never proposed. And that became a problem. Because while Leslie was obsessed with Henry, she was also obsessed with something else. The lifestyle she wanted. The life she saw other women living on social media. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, luxury vacations. All the things Henry couldn't afford to give her. So Leslie found another way to get them. She started seeing other men on the side, not for relationships, just for money. She'd meet them through apps, go on dates, let them buy her things. Sometimes it went further than that. Sometimes it was just about survival. She told herself it didn't mean anything. It was just business. Henry didn't. At least not at first. But 3 years into their relationship, he found out. Leslie came home one night wearing a bracelet Henry had never seen before. A gold bracelet that looked expensive. Too expensive for her to afford on her own. "Where'd you get that?" Henry asked. Leslie lied. "My friend gave it to me." Henry didn't believe her. He started paying closer attention. He noticed new shoes, new purses, new perfume. Things Leslie couldn't afford. Things he definitely hadn't bought for her. One night, he went through her phone while she was in the shower. He found the messages, the photos, the arrangements. When Leslie came out of the bathroom, Henry was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding her phone. "Who's Martin's?" Henry asked. Leslie froze. "A friend." "A friend who sends you money? A friend you're meeting at hotels?" Leslie tried to explain. She told Henry it wasn't what it looked like. She said she was just trying to make extra money. She said it didn't mean anything. She wasn't sleeping with these men. She was just letting them buy her things. Henry didn't believe her, but he also didn't leave. He told her if it happened again, they were done. Leslie promised it wouldn't, but it did. 6 months later, Henry caught her again. Different man. Same situation. This time, Leslie broke down crying. She admitted the truth. She told Henry she'd been hooking up with men for money because she wanted things he couldn't afford to give her. She said she had expensive taste. She liked nice things, and she didn't want to wait years to have them. Henry was furious, but he also loved her, so he gave her another chance. "This is the last time," he said. "If I catch you again, we're done. I don't care how much I love you." Leslie promised she'd stop, and for a while she did. But a year later, it happened again. This time, Henry caught her through a mutual friend. Someone had seen Leslie at a restaurant with a man who wasn't Henry, holding hands, kissing. When Henry confronted her, Leslie didn't even try to lie. She just cried and begged him not to leave. "I'll change," she said. "I promise I'll change. I'll stop. I'll never do it again." Henry looked at her and said something that broke her heart. "I believe you'll stop, but I don't believe you'll change." He didn't break up with her that night. But something shifted. Henry stopped talking about the future. He stopped making long-term plans. He stopped talking about marriage altogether. Leslie noticed, and it terrified her. She was 34 years old. All her friends were getting engaged, getting married, starting families, and she was stuck with a man who wouldn't commit to her anymore. So Leslie started thinking. She needed to do something big, something that would prove to Henry she was serious about him, something that would make him see her as wife material. She thought about getting pregnant, but Henry always insisted on protection when they were intimate. Always. He wasn't taking any chances. She thought about acting like a wife, cooking for him, cleaning for him, taking care of him the way a wife would. But Henry shut that down immediately. "I can sort my own needs," he told her. "I don't need you to do that." Leslie felt stuck. Nothing she did seemed to work. Henry loved her, but he wouldn't marry her. And deep down, she knew why. He'd never forgiven her for the cheating. He'd never forgotten what she'd done. And even though he stayed with her, something inside him had decided she wasn't the woman he'd marry. Leslie couldn't accept that. One night, she was scrolling through a streaming service looking for something to watch. She came across a romantic drama about a woman in a complicated relationship. The woman loved a man who wouldn't commit. So she started dating someone else publicly. She made sure her real boyfriend saw her with another man. She made him jealous. And it worked. The boyfriend panicked, realized what he was losing, and proposed. Leslie watched that movie 3 times. She started fantasizing about it. What if she did the same thing? What if she started dating someone else? Not for real, just for show. Just to make Henry realize he was about to lose her. Maybe if Henry saw her with another man, he'd panic. Maybe he'd realize she was serious about moving on. Maybe he'd finally propose. The more Leslie thought about it, the more it made sense. She didn't want to actually leave Henry. She just wanted to scare him into marrying her. And if that meant using another man as a pawn, so be it. That's when Leslie Pope made the decision that would eventually destroy 3 lives. She was going to find someone else to date. Someone who would make Henry jealous. Someone who would push Henry into action. She just needed to find the right man. Leslie didn't have to look far to find her target. She met Smith Monroe through a mutual acquaintance at a community event. He was standing alone near the food table, looking uncomfortable in a room full of people. Smith was 43 years old. He owned a successful property management business. He dressed well, he was polite, and most importantly, he was alone. Leslie watched him for a while before approaching. She could tell he wasn't used to social situations like this. He kept checking his phone. He didn't talk to anyone unless they talked to him first. He looked like someone who would be grateful for attention. Perfect. Leslie walked over and started a conversation. She smiled. She laughed at his jokes. She touched his arm when he said something funny. And she watched as Smith's face lit up. It was almost too easy. Within 20 minutes, Smith was completely engaged. He asked for her number. She gave it to him. He texted her the next day asking if she wanted to get coffee. Leslie said yes. Their first date was awkward. Smith was nervous. He talked too much. He apologized for talking too much. He spilled his coffee. He apologized for that too. But Leslie didn't care. She wasn't there because she liked him. She was there because Henry needed to see her with someone else. After their coffee date, Leslie posted a photo on social media. Nothing obvious. Just a picture of 2 coffee cups on a table with the caption, "Good company." She knew Henry would see it. They were still friends on social media, and she knew he'd wonder who she was with. But Henry didn't react. He didn't comment. He didn't text. He didn't do anything. So Leslie went on a second date with Smith. This time she made sure to post a picture of them together, smiling, standing close. Still, Henry didn't react. Smith, on the other hand, was falling fast. He'd never had a woman like Leslie show interest in him before. He wasn't particularly handsome. He'd been rejected more times than he could count. He'd spent most of his adult life alone, convinced that marriage just wasn't in the cards for him. But now here was this beautiful woman laughing at his jokes, texting him good morning, asking to see him again. Smith couldn't believe his luck. By the third date, Smith was already thinking long term. He was already imagining what a future with Leslie might look like. Leslie, meanwhile, was getting frustrated. Her plan wasn't working. Henry wasn't jealous. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't reacting at all. So she escalated. She started spending more time with Smith. She introduced him to her friends. She let him hold her hand in public. She kissed him once, just to see if Henry would notice. Henry noticed, but his reaction wasn't what Leslie expected. One night, Leslie got a text from a mutual friend. "Henry's asking about you. Wants to know who the guy is you've been seeing." Leslie's heart jumped. It was working. He was noticing. He was paying attention. She texted back. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you're moving on. Told him you're seeing someone serious." Leslie smiled. This was exactly what she wanted. But the next message made her stomach drop. "He said good for you. Said it's about time you found someone who can give you what you want." Leslie stared at her phone in disbelief. That wasn't jealousy. That wasn't panic. That was Henry letting her go. She waited for him to text her. She waited for him to call. She waited for him to show up at her door and tell her he'd made a mistake. But he didn't. A week later, Leslie found out why. Henry had started seeing someone else. A woman he worked with. Someone who didn't cheat on him. Someone who didn't need money or gifts or expensive things. Someone who just wanted him. And 2 months after that, Henry did something that shattered Leslie completely. He proposed to that woman. Leslie found out through social media. She saw the photos, the ring, the happiness on Henry's face. The woman he'd known for less than a year was getting everything Leslie had spent 7 years fighting for. Leslie's plan had backfired in the worst possible way. She'd gambled on making Henry jealous. Instead, she'd pushed him into someone else's arms. And now she was stuck with Smith Monroe. A man she didn't love. A man she'd only been using to manipulate someone else. But Smith didn't know that. Smith thought Leslie was falling for him the way he was falling for her. He thought they had something real. He thought she was the woman he'd been waiting for his entire life. 1 month after Leslie found out about Henry's engagement, Smith asked her to dinner at an expensive restaurant. He was nervous. He could barely eat. Halfway through the meal, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Leslie," he said, "I know we haven't been together that long, but I've never felt this way about anyone before. You make me happy. You make me feel like I matter, and I don't want to lose you." He opened the box. Inside was a diamond ring. $45,000. The most expensive thing Smith had ever bought in his life. "Will you marry me?" Leslie stared at the ring. She thought about Henry. She thought about the life she'd lost. She thought about the fact that she had no backup plan and nowhere else to go. She thought about how much she hated herself in that moment. And then she said yes. Not because she loved Smith. Not because she wanted to marry him. But because Henry was gone, and this was the only option she had left. Smith's face lit up. He stood up and hugged her. He was crying. He was so happy. Leslie hugged him back and felt absolutely nothing. That night she went home and sent Henry one last message. He proposed. I said yes. I wish it was you. Henry saw the message but didn't respond. 3 hours later, he blocked her on every platform. And that's when Leslie realized she'd lost everything. The man she loved, the future she wanted. And now she was tied to a man she'd never wanted in the first place. But there was one more problem. Smith's lawyer insisted on a prenuptial agreement. The terms were clear. If Leslie divorced Smith within the first year of marriage, she would get nothing. Not a single dollar. After 1 year, she'd be entitled to 10% of his assets for every year they stayed married. Leslie's friend Sandra Dixon warned her about it. Girl, that prenup is a trap, Sandra said. If you leave him in the first year, you walk away with nothing. Leslie signed it anyway. She didn't have a choice. She had no money of her own, no job, no plan. And Henry had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her. So Leslie Pope became Leslie Pope Monroe in a small courthouse ceremony. Smith's brother Paul attended, though he didn't look happy about it. Smith's business partner showed up. A few of Smith's friends. Leslie's mother didn't come. She'd told Leslie she was making a mistake. She'd told her not to marry a man she didn't love. But Leslie did it anyway, because in her mind, she could make it work. She could survive 1 year. She could pretend to be a wife. And then she could divorce him, take her cut, and move on with her life. What she didn't realize was that Smith Monroe actually loved her, and that would make everything so much worse. Before we continue, if you're finding this story as disturbing as we are, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and share this video. These stories don't tell themselves, and your support keeps this channel going. Now, let's keep moving. The first week of marriage was worse than Leslie expected. There was no honeymoon. Smith had business meetings scheduled that he couldn't cancel. So instead of a romantic trip, Leslie spent her first week as a married woman sitting in Smith's house, staring at her phone, wishing she was anywhere else. Smith tried to make things work. He really did. He bought her flowers. He made dinner reservations. He tried to start conversations about their future together. He asked her what kind of furniture she wanted, what color she wanted to paint the bedroom, whether she wanted to get a dog. Leslie gave vague answers to everything. She wasn't thinking about furniture or paint colors. She was thinking about Henry, about how he was probably on his honeymoon right now with his new wife, about how that should have been her. Smith noticed she was distant. He noticed she barely looked at him when they talked. He noticed she spent hours on her phone texting someone. One night during dinner, Smith asked her about it. "You've been on your phone a lot," he said. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," Leslie said without looking up. "Just texting a friend." "Which friend?" Leslie hesitated. "Just someone I've known for a while. We're catching up." Smith didn't push. He wanted to give her space. He wanted to be understanding. But the truth was, Leslie was texting Henry. She'd found a way to reach him through a mutual friend's account. She sent him messages telling him she missed him, telling him she'd made a mistake, telling him she still loved him. Henry didn't respond to most of them. The ones he did respond to were short and cold. "Stop contacting me. I'm married now. Move on. Leave me alone or I'm blocking this number too." But Leslie couldn't stop. She was obsessed with the idea that if she just said the right thing, if she just reminded him of what they had, he'd change his mind. Meanwhile, Smith was trying to be a good husband. He tried to be affectionate. He tried to initiate intimacy. But every time he touched her, Leslie pulled away. "I'm tired," she'd say. Or, "Not tonight." Or, "I'm not feeling well." Smith didn't understand. He thought maybe she was nervous. Maybe she needed time to adjust to being married. So he gave her space. But his brother Paul wasn't as patient. Paul Monroe had never liked Leslie. From the moment he met her, something felt off. She didn't ask Smith about his day. She didn't laugh at his jokes. She barely looked at him when he talked. Paul called Smith 3 days into the marriage. "How's married life?" Paul asked. "It's good," Smith said, but his voice didn't sound convincing. "You sure about that?" "She's just adjusting," Smith said. "It's a big change for both of us." Paul didn't buy it. "She's still texting someone named H. I saw her phone light up when we were at dinner last week." "That's her cousin," Smith said. "Her cousin Harmony." "You sure about that?" Smith wasn't sure about anything anymore, but he didn't want to admit it. He didn't want to admit that maybe Paul had been right all along. On the 7th day of their marriage, something changed. Leslie came into the living room where Smith was watching TV. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Smith muted the TV. "Of course." "Can I get a tattoo?" Smith looked at her, confused. "A tattoo?" "Yeah," Leslie said. "I've been thinking about it for a while. I think it would make me feel more confident." Smith didn't like tattoos. He'd never understood the appeal, but he could see how much this mattered to her, and he wanted to make her happy. He wanted to give her something that might help her feel more comfortable in this marriage. "If it's something you really want," Smith said, "then go ahead." Leslie smiled. It was the first real smile Smith had seen from her since the wedding. "Thank you," she said. The next day, Leslie went to Ink and Soul Tattoo Parlor. She spent 4 hours there. She brought a photo of handwritten initials. She was very specific about the placement. One on her chest, one near her pubic area. The tattoo artist, a woman named Giselle Hartman, thought the request was strange. "You sure about these placements?" Giselle asked. "These are pretty intimate spots." "I'm sure," Leslie said. Halfway through the session, Leslie pulled out her phone and FaceTimed someone. Giselle tried not to pay attention, but she couldn't help overhearing the conversation. "Look," Leslie said to whoever was on the other end, "I'm getting them done right now." The person on the phone said something Giselle couldn't hear. "I don't care if you're married," Leslie said. "You think I wanted to marry him? I wanted you." Giselle felt uncomfortable. She kept working, but the whole situation felt wrong. When the tattoos were finished, Leslie paid $800 in cash and left. She came home that evening wearing a loose shirt. Smith was in the kitchen making dinner. "How'd it go?" Smith asked. "Good," Leslie said. "I think you're going to like them." She pulled down her shirt slightly to show him the one on her chest, a heart with the initials HB in elegant script. Smith stared at it. Something about it felt off. The design was too personal, too intimate. It didn't look like something she'd gotten on a whim. "What does HB stand for?" Smith asked. Leslie smiled. "Heartbeat. Because you make my heart beat faster." Smith wanted to believe her. He tried to convince himself it was a sweet gesture, but deep down, something didn't feel right. "Can I see the other one?" Smith asked. "It's in a private spot," Leslie said. "I'll show you later." She didn't show him later. She went to bed early that night and locked the bathroom door when she changed. Smith lay awake that night thinking about those tattoos, about the initials, about the way Leslie had smiled when she explained what they meant. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to trust her. But a small voice in the back of his mind kept whispering that something was very, very wrong. 2 days after Leslie got the tattoos, everything fell apart. It was February 23rd, a Tuesday night. Leslie was on the couch watching an NBA game, Orlando Magic versus Miami Heat. She wasn't really paying attention. She was just killing time. Smith was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. He wasn't really cleaning. He was just avoiding another awkward silence with his wife. At 9:47 p.m., Leslie's phone lit up on the coffee table. She'd fallen asleep. The game was still playing in the background, but she was completely out. Smith glanced over and saw the notification on her screen. But something else caught his eye. "I still miss us." A message notification showing that it was delivered. Smith froze. Henry Brandon. Not Harmony. Not a cousin. A man. A man his wife was texting. Smith's heart started pounding. He looked at Leslie. She was still asleep. Her phone was right there. He knew this was wrong. He knew he shouldn't do it. But he also knew something wasn't right. And he needed to see the truth. Smith picked up the phone. His hands were shaking. He used Leslie's fingerprint to unlock it while she slept. He opened Facebook Messenger, and what he saw destroyed him. Months of messages between Leslie and Henry Brandon, hundreds of them. pages and pages of conversations that proved everything Smith had feared was true. The first thing he saw was a photo. Leslie standing in front of a mirror at the tattoo parlor. Her shirt pulled down, the fresh tattoo on her chest clearly visible. The caption read, "Guess whose initials are on me forever?" Henry's response, "You need help, Leslie. This is insane. I'm married now. Stop this." Leslie, "I'll always be yours, even when I'm in his bed." Smith felt like he couldn't breathe. He scrolled further. More messages, more photos, more confessions. Leslie to Henry, "I'm only with him until I can divorce him and take his money." Another message, "Once I hit the 1-year mark, I'm filing for divorce and coming back to you." Henry's response, "I don't want you, Leslie. I'm married. I'm happy. Move on." Leslie, "You'll change your mind. You always do." Smith kept scrolling. Voice messages from Leslie, crying, begging Henry to take her back, photos she'd sent him, explicit messages about how much she missed him, how much she wished he was the one she'd married. And then Smith found the most recent exchange, from 2 days ago, right after she got the tattoos. Henry, "Stop contacting me. If you don't leave me alone, I'm filing a restraining order." Leslie, "I got these tattoos for you. I marked my body for you. Doesn't that mean anything?" Henry, "It means you're obsessed. It means you need therapy. Leave me alone." Smith sat on the floor of the living room, his wife asleep 5 feet away, reading proof that his entire marriage was a lie. She didn't love him. She'd never loved him. She'd used him to try to make another man jealous. And when that didn't work, she married him anyway so she could rob him. And she'd tattooed that other man's initials on her body, on her chest, on her most private area, while wearing Smith's wedding ring. HB didn't mean heartbeat. It meant Henry Brandon. Smith looked at Leslie sleeping on the couch. She looked peaceful, innocent, like she hadn't just destroyed everything. He wanted to wake her up. He wanted to scream at her. He wanted to ask her how she could do this to him. But he didn't trust himself. He was too angry, too hurt, too broken. So instead, he grabbed his keys and walked out of the house. He drove to a hotel. He checked in. He sat on the edge of the bed and called his brother Paul. "I need you to be honest with me," Smith said. His voice was shaking. "Did you know?" "Know what?" Paul asked. "About her ex. About everything." Paul was quiet for a long moment. "I suspected something wasn't right, but I didn't have proof." "Well, I have proof now," Smith said. "She's been lying to me from the beginning. She married me to steal my money. She tattooed another man's name on her body while married to me. And she's been telling him she's going to leave me and come back to him." Paul didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said the only thing that made sense. "File for divorce. Tomorrow. First thing." Smith nodded, even though Paul couldn't see him. "That's what I'm going to do." "I'm sorry, brother," Paul said. "I really am." Smith hung up and sat in that hotel room until the sun came up. He didn't sleep. He just kept thinking about those tattoos, about the lies, about how completely he'd been used. By morning, Smith had made his decision. He wasn't going to be anyone's backup plan. He wasn't going to be used for money. And he sure as hell wasn't going to stay married to someone who'd marked her body with another man's initials. At 8:12 a.m., Smith went straight to his lawyer's office. "I need to file for divorce," he said. "Today." His lawyer didn't ask questions. He just pulled out the paperwork. By 6:00 p.m., Smith was back at his house with a manila envelope in his hand. He thought serving his wife divorce papers would be the worst moment of his life. He had no idea it was about to get so much worse. Smith walked through the front door at 8:15 p.m. Leslie was exactly where he'd left her the night before, on the couch, watching the same basketball game, Magic versus Heat. She looked up when he came in. "Where were you last night?" "Hotel," Smith said. His voice was flat. Empty. "Why?" Smith didn't answer right away. He just walked over to the couch and dropped the manila envelope on her lap. "What's this?" Leslie asked. "Read it." Leslie opened the envelope slowly. Her face went pale when she saw the words at the top of the first page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Smith, what is this? Her voice was shaking. What does it look like? Smith said. I'm divorcing you. Why? What did I do? Smith laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound. You tattooed his name on your body, while married to me. Leslie's eyes went wide. I don't know what you're talking about. Henry Brandon, Smith said. HB. I read the messages, Leslie. All of them. I saw the photos. I know everything. Leslie started crying immediately. Smith, please let me explain. Explain what? Smith's voice rose. Explain how you married me to rob me? Explain how you planned to wait 1 year, divorce me, and take half of everything I own? Explain how you got another man's initials permanently tattooed on your chest and your most private area while wearing my wedding ring? Leslie was sobbing now. I made a mistake. I was confused. You weren't confused, Smith said. You were using me. You lied to me. You manipulated me. And you humiliated me. I can change, Leslie begged. Give me another chance, please. Smith shook his head. The prenup says if we divorce in the first year, you get nothing, not $1. I made you sign it because I suspected you were after my money. I just didn't realize how right I was. Leslie's tears stopped. Her face changed. The desperation turned into something colder, something angrier. So that's it? You're just throwing me out? You have 48 hours to leave this house, Smith said. After that, I'm changing the locks. Where am I supposed to go? Call the man whose name you're wearing, Smith said. See if he'll take you in. Smith turned and walked toward the bedroom. He grabbed a suitcase and started packing clothes. I have nowhere to go, Leslie screamed after him. I have no money, no job, nothing. That's not my problem anymore, Smith said without looking at her. 20 minutes later, Smith was gone. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't look back. He just got in his car and drove to his brother's house. Leslie was left alone in that house with divorce papers on the coffee table and 48 hours to figure out what to do next. She tried calling Henry first. The call didn't go through. Then she called her mother. Mom, I need help. Smith is divorcing me. I need a place to stay. Her mother's voice was sharp, cold. I told you not to marry him for his money. I don't have room for you here, Leslie. You made this mess. You figure it out. The call ended. Leslie sat on that couch staring at the divorce papers, realizing how bad her situation really was. No husband, no money, no home, no future. Henry didn't want her. Smith was leaving her. Her mother wouldn't help her. She had $300 in her bank account and nowhere to go. At 11:28 p.m., she called the only person she thought might understand, Sandra Dixon. Sandra answered on the third ring. What's wrong? Everything, Leslie said. Her voice was shaking. Smith found out about Henry, about the tattoos, about everything. He's divorcing me. Oh no, Sandra said. What are you going to do? I don't know. The prenup means I get nothing. I have 48 hours to leave. I have no money, nowhere to go. There was a long pause. Then Sandra asked a question that changed everything. How much would you get if he died before the divorce was finalized? Leslie froze. What? I'm just asking, Sandra said. If something happened to him, before the divorce went through, you'd still be his wife, right? You'd inherit everything. Leslie didn't respond. Her mind was spinning. Are you saying? I'm not saying anything, Sandra interrupted. I'm just pointing out that timing matters. That's all. The line went quiet. Keep talking, Leslie finally said. And Sandra did. For the next 47 minutes, Sandra walked Leslie through what would happen if Smith died before the divorce was finalized, how much Leslie would inherit, how it would work legally, what Leslie's options would be. Leslie never once said, "That's insane." She never said, "I would never do that." She just listened. When the call ended at 12:15 a.m., Leslie sat in the dark living room, staring at those divorce papers. She thought about Henry. about how he'd moved on so easily, about how he'd given another woman everything Leslie had wanted. She thought about Smith, about how he'd humiliated her, about how he was going to throw her out with nothing, and she made a decision. If Smith Monroe was going to take everything from her, she'd take everything from him first. At 4:17 p.m., Sandra pulled up to the house. She didn't waste time. She walked inside carrying a small black case. She set it on the kitchen counter without saying a word. "Open it," Sandra said. Leslie opened the case. Inside was a .38 caliber revolver. Her hands started shaking. "Where did you get this?" "My cousin's boyfriend," Sandra said. "He deals with situations like this. Serial numbers are filed off. Can't be traced." Leslie picked up the gun. It was heavier than she expected. Cold. Real. "You sure about this?" Sandra asked. "Because once you do it, you can't undo it." Leslie thought about everything. About Henry rejecting her. About Smith discovering the truth. About being thrown out with nowhere to go. "I'm sure," Leslie said. Sandra nodded. "Then listen carefully. You need to make this look random. Make it look like a robbery. Someone broke in. You got hurt. He got killed. That's the only story that works." "What if the police don't believe me?" "They will," Sandra said. "You just have to sell it. You have to cry. You have to scream. You have to make yourself believe it really happened." Sandra spent the next hour walking Leslie through every detail. How to stage the scene. How to injure herself to make it believable. How to call 911. What to say. What not to say. "You're going to tell them 2 men broke in," Sandra said. 2 men in masks. They were looking for money. They hit you when you said you didn't have a safe. Then Smith came home and they shot him. Then they ran. What if they ask for descriptions?" "Keep it vague," Sandra said. "Tall, dark clothes, masks. You were scared. You didn't see their faces clearly." Leslie nodded. She was taking mental notes of everything. "And whatever you do," Sandra said, "don't mention me. Not to anyone. Not ever. If they find out I gave you that gun, we both go down." "I won't," Leslie promised. Sandra looked at her for a long moment. Then she picked up the black case and walked to the door. "Do it tomorrow," Sandra said, "before he changes the locks, before the divorce moves forward." And then she was gone. Leslie stood in the kitchen holding the gun. She looked at it, felt the weight of it, thought about what she was about to do. She wasn't just planning to scare Smith. She wasn't planning to threaten him. She was planning to kill him. And she had less than 24 hours to do it. February 25th, the second day of Smith's 48-hour deadline. Smith woke up at his brother Paul's house that morning. He'd barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those tattoos. He saw those messages. He saw the proof that his entire marriage had been a scam from the very beginning. Paul made coffee and sat down across from his brother at the kitchen table. Smith looked exhausted, broken, like a man who'd lost everything that mattered to him. "You doing okay?" Paul asked. Smith shook his head. "I don't think I'll ever be okay again." "You will," Paul said. "It takes time, but you'll get through this." Smith wasn't so sure. He'd spent his whole life being rejected, being overlooked, being told he wasn't good enough. And then finally, someone had chosen him. Someone had said yes. Someone had married him. Except none of it was real. She'd never wanted him. She'd only wanted his money. And when she couldn't get that, she'd branded herself with another man's initials just to torture him. "I'm going to the house today," Smith said. "I need to start packing her things." Paul looked concerned. "You sure that's a good idea? Maybe let me come with you." "No," Smith said. "I need to do this alone. I need closure." Paul didn't like it, but he didn't argue. "Just be careful. People do stupid things when they're desperate." Smith nodded. "She's humiliated, not dangerous." That was the last conversation Paul Monroe would ever have with his brother. Smith spent the morning making phone calls. He called a moving company and scheduled them to come the next day. He called a locksmith and arranged to have the locks changed. He called his lawyer to confirm the divorce was moving forward. Everything was in motion. In 48 hours, Leslie would be out of his house. In a few months, the divorce would be finalized, and Smith could start rebuilding his life without her. At least, that was the plan. Around noon, Smith drove to his office. He had paperwork to finish, contracts to review. He tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting back to Leslie, to those tattoos, to the lies. His business partner noticed something was off. "You okay, man? You seem distracted." "Just dealing with some personal stuff," Smith said. "Anything I can help with?" "No," Smith said. "I just need to get through the next few days." Smith left the office early. He didn't want to be around people. He didn't want to explain what was happening. He didn't want anyone's pity. At 6:47 p.m., Smith stopped at a liquor store called Bottles and Pour. He walked in and headed straight for the bourbon section. He picked out an expensive bottle, $87, the kind of bourbon he only bought on special occasions. The clerk at the counter noticed Smith looked tired, defeated. "Big plans tonight?" the clerk asked. "Celebrating freedom," Smith said. The clerk smiled. "Well, enjoy it." Smith paid in cash and left. He sat in his car for a few minutes, staring at the bottle. He thought about going back to Paul's house. He thought about calling a friend. He thought about doing anything other than going home. But he needed to face Leslie one more time. He needed to tell her when the movers were coming. He needed to make sure she understood this was really happening. At 7:30 p.m., Smith sent Leslie a text. "Coming home at 8:30. Be ready to talk logistics." Leslie responded immediately. "Okay." Smith didn't know that while he was sending that text, Leslie was standing in the kitchen holding a loaded gun. He didn't know she'd been practicing what she was going to say when he walked through the door. He didn't know that Sandra had spent the last hour on the phone with her, making sure she was ready. Smith drove home slowly. He took the long way. He wasn't in a hurry to get there. At 8:32 p.m., Smith Monroe pulled into his driveway for the last time. He grabbed the bottle of bourbon and his briefcase from the passenger seat. He took a deep breath. He told himself he could do this. He could have one final conversation with Leslie and then leave. He had no idea that Leslie had been watching from the window, that she'd seen his headlights pull up, that she'd already hidden the gun in the couch cushions within easy reach. Smith walked through the garage and into the house. The lights were on in the living room. The TV was playing quietly in the background. Everything looked normal. Leslie was sitting on the couch. She looked calm. Too calm. "Did you start packing?" Smith asked. "We need to talk first," Leslie said. Smith set the bourbon bottle on the kitchen counter. "There's nothing to talk about. You have until tomorrow morning. The movers will be here at 10. "Smith, please," Leslie said. "Just listen to me for 5 minutes." Smith turned to look at her. She was sitting on the edge of the couch. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her face was blank, emotionless. "Fine," Smith said. 5 minutes. Leslie stood up slowly. "I never wanted it to end this way." Smith laughed bitterly. "You never wanted it to start this way either. You wanted Henry. You got me instead. That's not fair." "Fair?" Smith's voice rose. "You tattooed another man's initials on your body while married to me. You told him you were going to rob me and come back to him. Don't talk to me about fair." Leslie's hand moved toward the couch cushions. Smith didn't notice. He was too focused on her face, too focused on trying to understand how someone could be this cruel. "You used me," Smith said. "That's all this ever was. And I was stupid enough to believe you might actually care about me." Leslie's fingers wrapped around the handle of the gun. "I never wanted it to end this way," she repeated. And then she pulled the gun from the cushions and pointed it directly at Smith's chest. Smith froze. His eyes went wide. "Leslie, what are you doing?" "I'm sorry," Leslie said, "but it has to be this way." And then she fired. The first shot hit Smith in the chest. He stumbled backward, his hand going to the wound. Blood started seeping through his shirt immediately. He looked at Leslie in complete shock, like he couldn't believe what was happening, like his brain couldn't process that his wife was shooting him. "Leslie," he started to say. She fired again. The second bullet hit his shoulder. The third hit his abdomen. Smith fell against the wall. He tried to stay upright, but his legs wouldn't hold him. He slid down to the floor, leaving a streak of blood on the white paint behind him. "Please," Smith gasped. "Stop." But Leslie didn't stop. She walked toward him, the gun still raised. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't lower the weapon. Smith tried to crawl toward the front door. He thought if he could just get outside, if he could just get to his car, maybe he could survive this. Leslie fired again. The fourth bullet hit him in the back. The fifth hit his arm. The sixth hit his leg. The seventh grazed the side of his head. Smith collapsed near the entryway. He couldn't move anymore. The pain was too much. The blood loss was too severe. He lay on the floor, struggling to breathe, looking up at the woman he'd married. "Why?" Smith whispered. Leslie didn't answer. She just stood over him and fired 5 more shots. Close range. Into his chest. Into his stomach. Into his ribs. Smith's body jerked with each impact. His eyes stayed open, staring at the ceiling. Blood pooled around him, spreading across the hardwood floor. And then, when Smith finally stopped moving, Leslie fired 3 more times. All 3 bullets went into his head, execution style, making absolutely sure he was dead. 15 bullets total. 3 would have been enough to kill him. The other 12 were just rage, just anger, just Leslie making sure Smith Monroe would never humiliate her again. When the gun finally clicked empty, Leslie stood there for a moment, staring at what she'd done. Smith's body was sprawled on the floor. His eyes were still open. Blood was everywhere, on the walls, on the floor, on Leslie's clothes and hands. For a few seconds, Leslie felt nothing. No guilt, no remorse, just emptiness. And then panic set in. She looked around the room. She looked at the gun in her hand. She looked at Smith's body. She'd just murdered her husband. And now she had to make sure no one would ever know it was her. Leslie ran to the kitchen. She grabbed a decorative lamp from the side table and smashed it on the floor. Glass scattered everywhere. She picked up the base of the lamp and held it in her hand. Then she raised it and hit herself in the face, hard enough to leave bruises, but not hard enough to knock herself out. Pain exploded across her cheek. Her eye started swelling immediately. She hit herself again on the other side of her face. Then she used her fingernails to scratch her own arms. Long, deep scratches that drew blood. She scratched until her arms were covered in red lines. She ripped her shirt. She knocked over a chair. She kicked over the coffee table. She made the living room look like a war zone. And then she waited. She stood in the kitchen, looking at the clock on the microwave. She needed to wait long enough for the scene to look real, for the blood to spread, for everything to look like it had happened the way she was going to describe it. 8 minutes passed. 8 minutes of Leslie standing in her kitchen, covered in her husband's blood, preparing to lie to the police. At 9:10 p.m., Leslie picked up her phone and dialed 911. She took a deep breath, and then she started screaming. "Help! Please help! They shot him! They shot my husband!" The dispatcher's voice came through calm and professional. "Ma'am, what's your emergency?" "2 men broke in," Leslie screamed. "They had guns. They hit me and shot my husband. There's so much blood." "Ma'am, are the suspects still in the house?" "No, they ran. They went out the back door. Please send someone. Please. Help is on the way. Stay on the line with me. Are you injured?" "They hit me. My face. But my husband, he's not breathing. There's blood everywhere." "Don't move him. Help is 2 minutes away." Leslie kept screaming, kept crying. She was putting on the performance of her life. But in one brief moment, her crying stopped completely. Her voice went flat. "How long until they get here?" "Less than 2 minutes," the dispatcher said. And then Leslie started screaming again, like she'd never stopped. Later, when audio forensics analyzed that 911 call, they'd catch that moment. That split second when Leslie's mask slipped. when her voice went from hysterical to cold to hysterical again. But for now, the dispatcher just heard a terrified woman whose husband had been shot. At 9:16 p.m., the first police units arrived. Leslie was sitting on the front porch, covered in blood, rocking back and forth, crying. Officers immediately secured the scene. Paramedics rushed inside to check on Smith. But it was too late. He'd been dead for at least 10 minutes. 15 gunshot wounds, massive blood loss, no chance of survival. One of the paramedics came out and shook his head at the officers. "He's gone." Detective Raymond Hayes arrived at 9:24 p.m. His partner, Detective Nia Thornton, pulled up 3 minutes later. Hayes walked up to Leslie on the porch. She was still crying, still shaking, still covered in blood. "Ma'am," Hayes said gently, "I'm Detective Hayes. Can you tell me what happened?" Leslie looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Two men. They broke in. They had masks, dark clothes. They were looking for money." "Where did they enter?" "The front door. They kicked it in." Hayes glanced at the front door. It was closed, undamaged, no signs of forced entry. He looked back at Leslie. "The door doesn't look forced, ma'am." "I don't know," Leslie said quickly. "Maybe they picked the lock. I don't know how they got in. I just heard them." "What happened after they got inside?" "They grabbed me. They asked where the safe was. I told them we don't have a safe. They hit me." Leslie pointed to her face. "Then my husband came home. They shot him, over and over, and then they ran out the back." Hayes wrote everything down, but nothing about this story made sense. No forced entry, no stolen property, a victim shot 15 times, and a wife with injuries that looked staged. Detective Thornton came out of the house and walked over to Hayes. She pulled him aside. "This wasn't a robbery," Thornton said quietly. "I know," Hayes said. They both looked at Leslie sitting on the porch, crying into her hands. "She killed him," Hayes said. "Probably," Thornton agreed. "Now we just have to prove it." Detective Hayes walked back to Leslie. She was still sitting on the porch, still crying. But Hayes was watching her carefully now, watching how she cried, watching what she did with her hands, watching for any sign that she was faking it. "Ma'am, I need you to come to the station with us," Hayes said. "We need a detailed statement. We need descriptions of the suspects so we can put out alerts." Leslie looked up at him. "Can I change my clothes first? I have his blood all over me." Hayes shook his head. "Your clothes are evidence. We'll give you something clean to wear at the station." Leslie's face tightened for just a second, like she didn't like that answer. But then she nodded and stood up. An officer helped her into the back of a patrol car. As they drove away, Hayes turned to Thornton. "What do we know so far?" Thornton pulled out her notepad. "Victim is Smith Monroe, 43 years old, married for 2 weeks. Sustained 15 gunshot wounds at close range. Time of death approximately 9 p.m. 15 shots, Hayes said. "That's personal. That's not robbery." "Agreed," Thornton said. "And there's no forced entry. The front door is intact, no broken windows, nothing." Hayes walked into the house. The crime scene unit was already taking photos and collecting evidence. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, on the walls, pooled around Smith's body near the front door. Hayes stood up and looked around the room. A lamp was smashed on the floor. A chair was knocked over. The coffee table was askew. It looked like there had been a struggle, but something felt wrong. Hayes walked over to the couch. He saw blood spatter on the cushions. He saw the indentation where someone had been sitting. And then he saw something else. A small gap between 2 cushions, like something had been hidden there and then removed. "Thornton," Hayes called. "Come look at this." Thornton walked over. Hayes pointed to the couch. "What do you see?" Thornton studied the cushions. "Blood spatter. Someone was sitting here when the first shots were fired." "And?" Hayes prompted. Thornton looked closer. Something was hidden in the cushions. Something that's not here anymore. "The gun," Hayes said. "She hid it here, waited for him to come home, and then pulled it out and shot him." They walked outside. Hayes examined the front door again. No scratches, no damage, No signs of forced entry. He walked around to the back of the house. The back door was also intact. No damage. No signs anyone had run through it. Her story doesn't add up, Hayes said. She claims 2 men kicked in the front door, but the door is fine. She claims they ran out the back, but there's no evidence of that either. Thornton checked the yard. No footprints in the grass. No disturbed bushes. No signs anyone had fled the scene. They went back inside. Hayes talked to the paramedic who'd examined Leslie's injuries. "What can you tell me about her injuries?" Hayes asked. The paramedic frowned. "They're superficial. Bruising on her face that's consistent with blunt force trauma. But the pattern is strange." "Strange how?" "Too symmetrical," the paramedic said. "Like she hit herself. Or someone hit her very carefully. In a controlled way." "What about the scratches on her arms?" "Fingernail marks. Could be from an attacker. Could also be self-inflicted. The pattern is very straight, very deliberate." Hayes nodded. Everything was pointing in one direction. Leslie had killed her husband and staged the scene to look like a home invasion. At 10:23 p.m., Paul Monroe arrived at the house. He'd gotten a call from the police telling him his brother was dead. He looked devastated, broken. Like his entire world had just collapsed. A uniformed officer stopped him before he could get too close to the house. "Sir, this is a crime scene. You can't go in." "That's my brother," Paul said. His voice was shaking. "That's my brother in there." Hayes walked over. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Monroe." Paul looked at him with red eyes. "What happened? They said there was a robbery?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Hayes said. "Your brother's wife says 2 men broke in and shot him." Paul's expression changed immediately. "She said that?" "Yes. Do you have reason to doubt her story?" Paul looked toward the police car where Leslie was sitting. "Don't believe a word she says." Hayes pulled out his notepad. "Why not?" "Because my brother served her divorce papers yesterday," Paul said. "This morning. She had everything to lose." Hayes stopped writing and looked up. "Divorce papers?" "Yeah," Paul said. "He found out she'd been lying to him, using him. He was kicking her out. She was about to lose everything." "Did your brother mention feeling threatened by her?" "No," Paul said. "He said she was humiliated, not dangerous. But I told him desperate people do stupid things." Hayes closed his notepad. "Thank you, Mr. Monroe. We'll be in touch." As Paul walked away, Hayes turned to Thornton. "She had motive." "Big time," Thornton agreed. "Divorce means she loses everything. But if he dies before the divorce is final, she inherits everything." "Let's go talk to her," Hayes said. "It's time to see if her story holds up." They got in their car and drove to the police station. Leslie was already in an interrogation room, still wearing her bloody clothes, still looking like a victim. But Hayes knew better. He'd been doing this job for 20 years. He'd seen enough staged crime scenes to recognize one when he saw it. Leslie Pope Monroe had murdered her husband, and in the next few hours, Hayes was going to make her admit it. Leslie sat in the interrogation room for 45 minutes before anyone came in. They'd given her a bottle of water and a box of tissues. She'd changed out of her bloody clothes into a gray sweatshirt and sweatpants provided by the police. She kept her head down, kept wiping her eyes, kept playing the role of the traumatized wife. At 11:47 p.m., Detective Hayes and Detective Thornton entered the room. They sat down across from Leslie. Hayes set a folder on the table between them. "Mrs. Monroe," Hayes said, "I know this has been a terrible night for you. We just need to go through everything one more time so we can find the men who did this." Leslie nodded. "Okay." "Walk me through your day," Hayes said, "starting from this morning." Leslie took a breath. "Smith left early. He was staying at his brother's house. We were having problems." "What kind of problems?" "Marriage problems," Leslie said. "He wanted some space." "Did he say why?" Leslie hesitated. "He thought I wasn't being honest with him about something." "About what?" "About a friend," Leslie said quietly. "An old friend. He thought I was still in contact with them." Hayes made a note. Were you? A little, Leslie admitted. But it wasn't anything serious. It was just texting. Okay, Hayes said. So Smith was at his brother's house. When did you last see him? This afternoon. He came by to get some clothes. He said he'd be back tonight to talk about logistics. Logistics for what? Leslie's voice cracked. For me, moving out. He was asking you to move out? Leslie nodded. He wanted a separation. He gave me 48 hours. Hayes wrote that down. How did that make you feel? Scared, Leslie said. I didn't know where I was going to go. I don't have any money. I don't have family nearby. Must have made you angry too, Thornton said. Leslie looked at her. I wasn't angry. I was hurt. Hurt enough to do something desperate? Thornton asked. I didn't do anything, Leslie said quickly. I was just sitting at home waiting for him. Hayes leaned forward. Tell me about the men who broke in. Leslie's hands started shaking. I was on the couch watching TV around 9. I heard the front door open. I thought it was Smith coming home early. Then what happened? 2 men came in. They were wearing masks, dark clothes. They had guns. What kind of masks? Ski masks, Leslie said. Black ones. And what kind of guns? Leslie paused. I don't know. I don't know anything about guns. They just looked big. What happened next? They grabbed me. One of them asked where the safe was. I told them we don't have a safe. He hit me. Leslie pointed to her bruised face. Which one hit you? Hayes asked. I don't know. The taller one, I think. How tall? I don't know. Maybe 6 feet? I was scared. I wasn't paying attention to details. Hayes nodded. Then what? They kept asking about money. I kept saying we didn't have any. Then I heard Smith's car in the driveway. The men heard it too. One of them told me to stay quiet or he'd shoot me. What happened when Smith came inside? Leslie started crying again. He walked in. He saw them. He asked what was happening, and they just started shooting, over and over. I was screaming. I tried to get to him, but one of them pushed me down. And then? Then they ran. Out the back door. They were gone. Hayes sat back. How long between when they shot Smith and when you called 911? I don't know. A minute? 2 minutes? I was in shock. Hayes looked at Thornton. She pulled out a report and slid it across the table. Mrs. Monroe, Thornton said, we examined your house. There's no forced entry at the front door. No damage to the back door. No signs anyone ran through your backyard. Leslie looked confused. I don't understand. They were there. I saw them. We also checked your husband's wallet, Hayes said. He had $340 in cash. It's still there. Nothing was taken from the house. No TV, no laptops, no jewelry, nothing. Maybe they got scared when they heard the sirens, Leslie said. They shot your husband 15 times, Hayes said. That's not panic, that's rage. Leslie shook her head. I don't know why they did that. I'm telling you what happened. Hayes opened the folder. He pulled out a photo of the crime scene. Smith's body on the floor. Blood everywhere. 15 bullets, Hayes said. 3 in the head. That's execution style. That's personal. Leslie looked at the photo and started crying harder. Hayes pulled out another document. Mrs. Monroe, we pulled your phone records. You made a 47-minute call last night. To Sandra Dixon. Right after your husband served you divorce papers. Leslie's face went pale. So? She's my friend. I was upset. What did you talk about for 47 minutes? My situation, my marriage, normal stuff. Did she offer any advice? She just listened. Thornton leaned forward. Mrs. Monroe, we're getting a warrant for Sandra Dixon's phone right now. If there's something on that phone that contradicts what you're telling us, you need to say it now. Leslie didn't respond. She just stared at the table. Did Sandra suggest a way out of your situation? Hayes asked. Leslie shook her head. No. Because here's what we think happened, Hayes said. We think you called Sandra in a panic. We think she told you that if your husband died before the divorce was final, you'd inherit everything. We think she gave you an idea, and we think you took it." "That's not true," Leslie said. "Then help us understand," Thornton said. "Because nothing about your story makes sense. No forced entry, nothing stolen. Your injuries look staged, and you had motive. You were about to lose everything." Leslie stood up. "I want a lawyer." Hayes closed the folder. "That's your right." The interrogation ended, but Hayes and Thornton knew they were close. They just needed one more piece of evidence. One thing that would break Leslie's story completely. At 2:34 a.m. they got it. A judge signed the warrant for Sandra Dixon's phone records, and when the records came through, everything fell into place. Text messages between Sandra and Leslie, planning, coaching, instructions. Sandra: "Don't call me after, don't mention me." Sandra: "Make it look random, violent." Sandra: "You need to make injuries on yourself look real." Hayes read through the messages and smiled. "We got her." At 5:12 a.m., a team of officers raided Sandra Dixon's house. They arrested her on conspiracy to commit murder. They seized her phone. They brought her to the station. And when they showed Sandra the evidence, when they showed her Leslie's confession was coming, Sandra broke. She admitted everything. The phone call, the gun, the plan. All of it. At 6:30 a.m., Hayes went back into the interrogation room where Leslie was waiting with her public defender. "Mrs. Monroe," Hayes said, "Sandra Dixon is in the next room. She's telling us everything. About the gun she gave you. About the plan you made together. About how she coached you on what to say." Leslie's face crumbled. "If you cooperate now," Hayes said, "the prosecutor might consider that. But if you keep lying, you're looking at life without parole." Leslie looked at her lawyer. The lawyer nodded. "Tell them the truth." And finally, after hours of lying, Leslie broke down. She said, "If he died before the divorce was final, I'd get everything. She gave me a gun. She told me how to make it look like a robbery." "What happened when Smith came home?" Leslie was crying now, full body-shaking sobs. "I was waiting on the couch. I had the gun hidden. When he came in, we started arguing. He was so mean. He was throwing me out like I was nothing, and I pulled the gun and shot him." "How many times?" "I don't know. I kept shooting until the gun was empty. I couldn't stop." "What did you do after?" "I hit myself. I scratched myself. I broke things. I made it look like someone else did it. Then I called 911. Hayes recorded every word. When Leslie finished, he turned off the recorder. "Leslie Pope Monroe," he said, "you're under arrest for the murder of Smith Monroe." While Leslie was confessing, Sandra Dixon was in another interrogation room 3 doors down. She'd been there for an hour, insisting she had nothing to do with Smith Monroe's death. Detective Thornton sat across from her, a stack of papers between them. Sandra kept her arms crossed, kept her face blank, kept insisting she was innocent. "I don't know what Leslie told you," Sandra said, "but I had nothing to do with what happened." Thornton opened a folder and pulled out printed text messages. "These are from your phone, messages between you and Leslie from the night of February 23rd. Sandra glanced at them but didn't say anything. Thornton read one aloud. "Don't call me after. Don't mention me." She looked up. "Why would you tell her not to mention you if you weren't involved?" "I was just giving her advice," Sandra said. "She was upset about her divorce." "What kind of advice?" "Friend advice. Life advice." Thornton pulled out another message. "Make it look random. Violent." She read it slowly. "That's not friend advice. That's coaching someone on how to commit murder." Sandra's face tightened. "You're twisting my words." "Am I?" Thornton pulled out more messages. "You need to make injuries on yourself look real. Make them believe you're scared." She set the paper down. "Sandra, you didn't just give advice. You planned this with her." "I didn't plan anything," Sandra said. "Leslie made her own choices." "With your help," Thornton said. "With a gun you provided." Sandra's eyes widened slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, Thornton said. Leslie already told us. She said you gave her a .38 caliber revolver. She said you got it from your cousin's boyfriend. She said you brought it to her house in a black case. Sandra was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I want a lawyer. But it was too late. The damage was done. Leslie had already given them everything. The confession, the timeline, the details about the gun. Police immediately went looking for Sandra's cousin's boyfriend. His name was Darnell Crawford. He lived on the south side of town in a rundown apartment complex. Officers knocked on his door at 7:15 a.m. Darnell answered, wearing basketball shorts and no shirt. He looked half asleep. Darnell Crawford? One officer said. Yeah, what's this about? We need to talk to you about a gun. Darnell's face changed. He tried to close the door, but officers pushed it open. They found 3 illegal firearms in his apartment, all with filed serial numbers, all untraceable. Darnell was arrested on weapons trafficking charges. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he admitted he'd sold a .38 caliber revolver to Sandra Dixon 3 weeks earlier. Cash deal. No paperwork. No questions asked. She said she needed protection, Darnell told investigators. Said she lived alone and wanted something for safety. Did she say what she was protecting herself from? No. And I didn't ask. The gun itself was still missing. Leslie had dumped it after the murder, but she couldn't remember exactly where. She'd been in a panic. She'd driven a few blocks away and thrown it down a storm drain. Police searched every storm drain within a mile of the Monroe house. On the 3rd day of searching, they found it. Rusted from sitting in water, but still identifiable. Ballistics confirmed it was the murder weapon. Sandra's lawyer tried to argue that giving someone a gun wasn't the same as planning a murder, but the text messages proved otherwise. Sandra hadn't just provided a weapon. She'd coached Leslie on how to use it, how to stage the scene, how to lie to police. In the eyes of the law, that made her just as guilty. Sandra Dixon was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and illegal weapons possession. Her bail was set at $500,000. She couldn't afford it. She sat in jail for 8 months waiting for trial. During that time, she tried to reach out to Leslie. She wrote letters. She asked her lawyer to pass messages. She wanted to coordinate their stories. She wanted to make sure they were saying the same things. But Leslie never responded. Leslie had already made her choice. She'd thrown Sandra under the bus to try to save herself. And now Sandra was going down with her. Darnell Crawford took a plea deal. 8 years in federal prison for weapons trafficking. He'd be eligible for parole in 5. Sandra wasn't so lucky. The prosecutor wanted to make an example out of her. Wanted to show that helping someone commit murder was just as bad as pulling the trigger. Sandra's lawyer tried to negotiate, tried to get the charges reduced, but the evidence was too strong. The text messages, the phone call, the gun. Everything pointed to Sandra being a willing participant in Smith Monroe's murder. Her trial was scheduled for 6 months after Leslie's, but Sandra knew she didn't stand a chance. Not with Leslie testifying against her. Not with all that evidence. So she took a deal. 15 years in prison. Eligible for parole after serving 85% of her sentence. It wasn't the outcome she'd imagined when she answered Leslie's phone call that night. When she'd suggested that maybe timing mattered. When she'd given her friend a gun and told her how to use it. Sandra Dixon had thought she was helping. Thought she was giving good advice. Thought she was solving a problem. Instead, she'd destroyed her own life along with everyone else's. 3 days after Leslie's arrest, the full story started coming out. Detectives began piecing together the bigger picture. The history between Leslie and Henry Brandon. The manipulation. The tattoos. All of it. Detective Hayes tracked down Henry Brandon and asked him to come in for an interview. Henry was reluctant. He didn't want anything to do with this case. He'd moved on with his life. He'd gotten married. He'd left Leslie in the past where she belonged. But the police needed his statement. They needed to understand the relationship. They needed to establish motive. Henry showed up at the police station wearing a construction company uniform. He looked tired, uncomfortable, like he wanted to be anywhere but there. Hayes led him into an interview room and sat down across from him. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Brandon." Henry nodded. "Can we make this quick? I don't want my wife knowing about this." "I'll do my best," Hayes said. "How long were you in a relationship with Leslie Pope?" 7 years, Henry said, give or take. "And how would you describe that relationship?" Henry thought for a moment. "Complicated. She was obsessed with getting married. I wasn't ready. She cheated on me multiple times to make money. I kept forgiving her. Eventually, I realized she wasn't going to change." "When did the relationship end?" "About a year ago," Henry said. "She started seeing some rich guy to make me jealous. I called her out on it. She admitted it. I ended things." "How did she react?" "She didn't handle it well," Henry said. "She kept texting me, calling me, showing up places she knew I'd be. I had to block her on everything." Hayes pulled out a photo. It was a screenshot from Leslie's phone. The tattoo on her chest, HB in a heart. "Do you recognize this?" Hayes asked. Henry's face went pale. "Yeah. She sent me that photo while she was getting it done." "When?" "A few weeks ago. Maybe a month. She was FaceTiming me from the tattoo place. I told her to stop. Told her she needed help. She said she was doing it to prove she loved me." "Did you ask her to get those tattoos?" "No," Henry said firmly. "I told her not to. I told her I was married and she needed to move on. She wouldn't listen." Hayes showed him another photo. Messages between Leslie and Henry. Long, desperate texts from Leslie. Short, cold responses from Henry. "She was still contacting you even after you blocked her?" Hayes asked. "She found ways," Henry said. "Fake accounts, friends' accounts. She wouldn't leave me alone." "Did you know she'd gotten married?" "I saw it on social media," Henry said. "I thought maybe she'd finally moved on. I didn't realize she was just using that guy." Hayes closed the folder. "Mr. Brandon, Leslie killed her husband because he found out about those tattoos. He found out they were your initials. He filed for divorce, and she decided to kill him instead of losing his money." Henry put his head in his hands. "This is insane. I never wanted any of this." "I know," Hayes said. "But we need you to testify. We need you to explain the relationship. The jury needs to understand why she did what she did." Henry looked up. "Will my name be public?" "Probably," Hayes said. "This is a murder trial. Everything comes out." Henry stood up. "I need to talk to my wife. I need to tell her before she hears it from someone else." Hayes nodded. "That's a good idea." Henry left the station. 2 weeks later, he filed for divorce from his wife. The media attention was too much. She couldn't handle being connected to this case. Couldn't handle people asking questions about Henry's past. Henry lost his marriage because of Leslie, just like Smith lost his life. Meanwhile, investigators also tracked down Giselle Hartman, the tattoo artist who'd done Leslie's tattoos. Giselle agreed to an interview. She told them everything. How Leslie had been very specific about the design. How she'd FaceTimed someone during the session. How that person had told her to stop and she'd ignored him. "I've done thousands of tattoos," Giselle said. "But that session made me uncomfortable." She was crying. She was begging whoever was on the phone to take her back. It was weird. "Did you ask her about it?" Hayes asked. "I asked if she was okay," Giselle said. "She said she was fine, but she clearly wasn't." Giselle's statement was added to the case file. Another piece of evidence showing Leslie's obsession with Henry. Another piece showing her state of mind. The media got hold of the tattoo story and ran with it. Headlines exploded across the country. Woman tattoos ex's initials. Murders new husband. Wife's secret tattoos lead to deadly divorce. HB didn't mean heartbeat. The tattooed murder case. Leslie's mugshot was released to the public. In the photo, the tattoo on her chest was clearly visible. HB in a heart, right there for everyone to see. The photo went viral. People shared it, commented on it, made memes out of it. Leslie became a symbol of obsession gone wrong. Psychologists weighed in. True crime podcasts covered the case. Everyone had an opinion about what kind of person would tattoo an ex's initials while married to someone else. Dr. Vivian Castellano, a forensic psychologist, was brought in to evaluate Leslie before trial. She spent 3 hours interviewing her, reviewing her history, analyzing her behavior. Her official diagnosis: borderline personality disorder with obsessive attachment patterns and narcissistic tendencies. Leslie has an inability to accept rejection, Dr. Castellano wrote in her report. When reality doesn't match her expectations, she experiences narcissistic rage. The tattoos were a physical manifestation of her inability to let go. And when her marriage threatened her financial security, she chose violence over acceptance. The report was damning. It painted Leslie as someone who was always going to end up here, someone whose obsession and desperation made violence inevitable. Henry Brandon read about the case from a distance. He refused all interview requests. He changed his phone number. He deleted his social media. He wanted nothing to do with any of it. But he couldn't escape the guilt. The feeling that maybe if he'd been clearer with Leslie earlier, if he'd cut her off completely years ago, maybe Smith Monroe would still be alive. That guilt would follow Henry for the rest of his life. 8 months after Smith Monroe's murder, Leslie Pope Monroe's trial began. The courthouse was packed. Media crews lined the street outside. Spectators filled every seat in the gallery. Everyone wanted to see the woman who'd tattooed her ex's initials and then killed her husband. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Clifton Reese. He was 52 years old, experienced, and ruthless in the courtroom. He'd been prosecuting murder cases for 25 years. He knew how to work a jury. Leslie's defense attorney was Jolene McBride, a public defender who looked exhausted before the trial even started. She knew this was an unwinnable case. Her client had confessed. The evidence was overwhelming, but she had to try. Jury selection took 2 days. The defense wanted people who might be sympathetic to a woman in a desperate situation. The prosecution wanted people who believed in personal responsibility. In the end, they settled on 12 jurors, 7 women, 5 men, mixed ages and backgrounds. On the first day of trial, Clifton Reese stood up to give his opening statement. He walked slowly in front of the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. Leslie Pope Monroe didn't marry for love, he said. She married for money. And when that money was about to be taken away from her, she decided to take something else instead. Her husband's life. He walked over to a large screen and pulled up a photo of Smith Monroe, smiling, alive, happy. "This is Smith Monroe," Reese said. 43 years old, successful businessman, a man who spent most of his life alone, wondering if he'd ever find someone to share his life with. And then he met Leslie Pope. She smiled at him. She laughed at his jokes. She made him feel like he mattered. So he married her. Reese pulled up another photo. The crime scene. Smith's body on the floor. Blood everywhere. 14 days later he was dead, shot 15 times by the woman he thought loved him. The jury stared at the photo. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked angry. Reese continued. "The evidence in this case is overwhelming. Leslie confessed to killing her husband. She admitted to staging the crime scene. She admitted to lying to police. She admitted that she did it because he was divorcing her, and she would lose everything. This isn't a complicated case. This is murder. Premeditated. Planned. Executed." He sat down. Jolene McBride stood up for her opening statement. She looked tired, defeated, but she tried. "My client made a terrible mistake," she said. "She was desperate. She was scared. She was about to lose her home and be thrown out with nothing. She panicked. She made the worst decision of her life. But this wasn't a cold, calculated murder. This was a woman in crisis who didn't see any other way out." The jury didn't look convinced. The prosecution's case took 3 weeks. They called witness after witness, each one building a stronger case against Leslie. Paul Monroe testified first. He talked about his brother, about the warnings he'd given him, about the phone call the night Smith discovered the tattoos. "My brother called me crying," Paul said. "He told me she'd tattooed another man's initials on her body. He was destroyed. He said he'd never felt so humiliated in his life. Reese asked, "Did your brother feel threatened by Leslie?" "No," Paul said. "He thought she was just humiliated. He didn't think she was dangerous. None of us did." "Do you wish you'd done something differently?" Paul's voice broke. "Every single day." Detective Hayes testified next. He walked the jury through the investigation, the 911 call, the crime scene, the lack of forced entry, the staged injuries. He played the audio of Leslie's 911 call. The jury listened to her scream about two men breaking in, about them shooting her husband. And then Hayes played the moment where her voice went flat. "How long until they get here?" The jury heard it. That cold, emotionless question in the middle of her supposed panic. "That's not fear," Hayes said. "That's someone checking to make sure their plan is working." Forensic specialists testified about the blood spatter, about the bullet trajectories, about the fact that 15 shots showed rage, not panic. 3 bullets would have killed him, the specialist said. The other 12 were unnecessary. This was someone making sure he was dead. Sandra Dixon was called to testify. She'd taken a plea deal, 15 years in exchange for testifying against Leslie. Sandra sat in the witness box looking miserable. She wouldn't make eye contact with Leslie. Reese asked her about the phone call the night of February 23rd. "What did you and Leslie discuss?" Reese asked. "She told me Smith was divorcing her," Sandra said. "She said the prenup meant she'd get nothing. She asked what she should do." "And what did you tell her?" Sandra hesitated. "I asked her how much she'd get if he died before the divorce was final." "Why did you ask that?" "I don't know," Sandra said. "I was just thinking out loud. I didn't think she'd actually do it." "But you gave her a gun." Sandra nodded. "Yeah, I did." "Why?" "Because she asked for one, and I had access to one." "Did you tell her how to stage the crime scene?" Sandra's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." "Did you coach her on what to tell police?" "Yes." Reese let that sit with the jury for a moment. Then he asked, "Do you regret what you did?" Sandra started crying. "Every day. I'm so sorry. I never thought she'd actually kill him." The defense tried to discredit Sandra on cross-examination, tried to make her look like the mastermind. But it didn't work. The jury had already heard Leslie's confession. They knew who pulled the trigger. Henry Brandon was the prosecution's final witness. He walked into the courtroom looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. He refused to look at Leslie. Reese asked him about their relationship, about the cheating, about the tattoos. "Did you ask her to get those tattoos?" Reese asked. "No," Henry said firmly. "I told her not to. I told her I was married and she needed to move on." "Did she move on?" "No. She kept contacting me, kept sending me messages, kept saying she loved me and wanted me back." "Did you want her back?" "No," Henry said. "I'd moved on. I was married. I wanted nothing to do with her." Reese showed the jury the messages, the photos of the tattoos, the desperate confessions of love. The jury looked disgusted. This wasn't a woman who'd made a mistake. This was a woman who'd been obsessed, rejected, and then turned violent. When the prosecution rested, Jolene McBride had almost nothing to work with. She called a psychologist who testified that Leslie suffered from borderline personality disorder, that she had abandonment issues, that she made impulsive decisions when under stress. But that didn't change the facts. Leslie had planned this. She'd gotten a gun. She'd waited for Smith to come home. She'd shot him 15 times. And then Jolene made a mistake. She put Leslie on the stand. Jolene McBride had advised Leslie not to testify, but Leslie insisted. She thought she could win the jury over. She thought if she just explained herself, they'd understand. She was wrong. Leslie walked to the witness stand wearing a simple gray dress. No makeup, no jewelry. She'd lost weight in jail. She looked small, fragile, like someone who couldn't possibly have killed anyone. Jolene started with softball questions, asked Leslie about her childhood, about her relationship with Henry, about how scared she was when Smith filed for divorce. "I didn't know what to do," Leslie said. I had nowhere to go. No money. No job. I felt trapped. Did you plan to kill your husband? Jolene asked. No, Leslie said. I was just scared. When Sandra gave me the gun, I thought I'd just use it to protect myself if I needed to. I didn't plan to use it on Smith. What happened the night of February 25th? Smith came home angry, Leslie said. He was yelling at me, telling me I was nothing, telling me I'd ruined his life. I felt so small, so worthless. And then I saw the gun on the couch and I panicked. What do you mean? You panicked? I grabbed the gun and I shot him, Leslie said. I didn't mean to shoot him so many times. I just couldn't stop. I was so scared, so angry. Everything just happened so fast. Jolene nodded. No further questions. It was a weak defense, but it was all she had. Then Clifton Reese stood up for cross-examination, and he destroyed her. Mrs. Monroe, Reese said, you testified that you didn't plan to kill your husband. Is that correct? Yes, Leslie said, but you got a gun from Sandra Dixon the day before the murder, correct? Yes. And Sandra told you how to stage a crime scene, correct? She mentioned it, but... Yes or no, Mrs. Monroe, did Sandra Dixon tell you how to stage a crime scene? Yes, Leslie admitted. And you practiced injuring yourself before your husband came home, correct? I just wanted to be prepared in case something happened. Prepared for what? You said you didn't plan to kill him? Leslie didn't answer. Reese pulled out photos of the tattoos. Mrs. Monroe, while you were married to Smith Monroe, you got 2 tattoos. One on your chest and one near your pubic area. Is that correct? Yes, Leslie said quietly. And those tattoos have the initials HB, correct? Yes. What does HB stand for? Leslie hesitated. Heartbeat. That's what you told your husband, but that's not true, is it? Leslie looked down. No. What do the initials HB actually stand for? Henry Brandon, Leslie whispered. Your ex-boyfriend. The man you dated for 7 years. The man you were still in love with while married to Smith Monroe. I wasn't... You sent Henry Brandon photos of those tattoos while you were getting them done, correct? Yes. You told him you'd always be his, even when you were in Smith's bed, correct? Leslie started crying. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. You knew exactly what you wanted, Reese said. You wanted Henry Brandon. And when you couldn't have him, you married Smith Monroe for his money, correct? No, that's not... You told Henry in a text message that you were only with Smith until you could divorce him and take his money. We have that message. Do you deny sending it? Leslie shook her head. No, but I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? I was just venting. You were planning, Reese said. Planning to use Smith Monroe. Planning to rob him. And when he found out and filed for divorce, you decided to kill him instead. That's not what happened, Leslie said. Then what happened? Explain to this jury how you shot your husband 15 times in a panic. I don't know. I just kept pulling the trigger. Did you hit yourself in the face before or after you killed him? After. Did you scratch your own arms? Yes. Did you break the lamp to make it look like there was a struggle? Yes. Did you make up a story about 2 men breaking in? Yes. So you had enough clarity after killing your husband to stage an entire crime scene, injure yourself, and lie to police. But you want this jury to believe you were in a panic? Leslie didn't answer. She just cried. Mrs. Monroe, Reese said, you killed Smith Monroe because he was divorcing you, because the prenup meant you'd get nothing, because you'd rather be a widow than an ex-wife. Isn't that the truth? I didn't want to kill him, Leslie sobbed. I just didn't see any other way. That's not what I asked. Did you kill him so you could inherit his money? Leslie looked at the jury. Then she looked at Reese. Yes, she whispered. The courtroom went silent. Reese sat down. No further questions. The damage was done. Leslie had just admitted to exactly what the prosecution had been saying all along. She'd killed Smith Monroe for money. Jolene tried to repair the damage on redirect, but it was hopeless. The jury had heard everything they needed to hear. Closing arguments lasted 2 days. Reese hammered home the evidence, the confession, the tattoos, the planning, the 15 bullets. Leslie Pope Monroe is exactly what we said she was, Reese told the jury. A woman who married for money, got caught, and decided murder was easier than divorce. She deserves to spend the rest of her life in prison. Jolene tried one last time. My client made a terrible choice, but she's not a monster. She's a woman who panicked. A woman who made the worst decision of her life. She deserves punishment, but not life without parole. The jury wasn't convinced. They deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty, first-degree murder. Leslie collapsed in her chair. Her lawyer tried to comfort her, but there was nothing to say. 2 weeks later, the judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Leslie Pope Monroe would never be free again. Leslie was transferred to a state prison for women 3 days after her sentencing. It's a maximum security facility 2 hours outside the city. Gray walls, barbed wire, guard towers. The kind of place where people disappear and the world forgets about them. Her first week was brutal. Other inmates knew who she was. They'd seen her mugshot on the news. They'd heard about the tattoos. They'd heard she killed her husband for money. In prison, there's a hierarchy. Women who kill abusive husbands get some sympathy. But Leslie didn't kill an abuser. She killed a man who'd been nothing but kind to her. The other inmates made that clear. They didn't attack her physically, but they made her invisible. They talked about her like she wasn't there. They made sure she knew she wasn't welcome. One woman told her directly, "You're sick. You killed a good man for no reason." Leslie spent most of her time alone. She had a cellmate for the first month, but the woman requested a transfer. After that, Leslie got her own cell. Not as a privilege, but because no one wanted to room with her. The friendship between them was dead. Both women blamed each other for what happened. Sandra told other inmates that Leslie had twisted her words, that she'd never actually told her to kill Smith, that Leslie was a manipulator who destroyed everyone around her. Leslie told people Sandra was the one who gave her the idea, that Sandra had coached her, that Sandra was a witch who deceived her into thinking murder was the only option. Neither woman took full responsibility. Both saw themselves as victims of the other. Leslie requested tattoo removal multiple times. The tattoos haunted her. Every time she looked down at her chest, she saw HB. Every time she showered, she saw the other one. But prison doesn't cover cosmetic procedures. Her requests were denied. She'd have to live with those tattoos forever. Prison psychologists evaluated her regularly. Their reports were always the same. Inmate shows no genuine remorse, blames external circumstances, views herself as victim, no progress toward rehabilitation. 3 years into her sentence, Leslie tried to appeal her conviction. Her lawyer argued the confession was coerced. The appeal was denied. There were no grounds to overturn the verdict. 5 years in, Leslie stopped fighting, stopped writing letters, stopped requesting anything. She went through the motions, ate meals, worked in the laundry, went to her cell, slept, repeated. Other inmates said she'd become a ghost, just existing, waiting for nothing. The tattoos remained, permanent reminders of the man who didn't want her and the man she killed because of it. 6 months after Leslie's sentencing, Henry Brandon did something unexpected. He granted one interview, just one, to a local news station. He'd refused every request before this, but he wanted to say something. He wanted people to hear his side. The interview was conducted in an undisclosed location. Henry sat in a plain room. No windows visible. No identifying features. He looked tired, older than his 36 years, like the weight of everything had aged him. The reporter asked him about his relationship with Leslie. Henry took a deep breath before answering. Leslie was obsessed with marriage, not with me, with the idea of being married. I loved her, but I knew she wasn't ready. She kept cheating to get money for things I couldn't afford. How do you marry someone like that? He continued. I'm blessed to have a twin brother. We talk about everything. When I told him about Leslie, he said I needed to leave. He said she'd destroy me if I stayed. I should have listened sooner. The reporter asked if he felt any responsibility for what happened. Henry shook his head. I didn't tell her to marry Smith. I didn't tell her to kill him. Those were her choices. But I do pray she repents. I pray God forgives her, because what she did was evil. When asked how he felt knowing Leslie had tattooed his initials while married to someone else, Henry's expression hardened. That's sick. I told her to stop. I told her I was married. I told her to leave me alone. She wouldn't listen. I'm just grateful I never married her. It could have been me. The reporter pressed further. Do you think about Smith Monroe? Henry nodded slowly. Every day. That man didn't deserve what happened to him. He was just looking for love. And she killed him for it. I think about his family. About what they lost. And I'm grateful I escaped before she destroyed my life too. The interview aired on a Tuesday evening. Within hours, it went viral. Social media exploded with reactions. Some people sympathized with Henry. They understood why he'd never proposed. They agreed Leslie's behavior was concerning. They supported his decision to walk away. But others blamed him. They accused him of wasting 7 years of Leslie's life. They said he knew he wasn't going to marry her but kept her around anyway. They claimed he was part of the reason Leslie did what she did. Some even said he should be in prison too. Comments flooded social media. Why date someone for 7 years if you're not going to marry them? He played with her emotions. Another read, he knew she was desperate and he used that. He's not innocent in this. One particularly harsh comment said, Henry Brandon is the reason Smith Monroe is dead. He should be held accountable. Henry saw the backlash. He deleted the social media accounts he still had. He stopped responding to any requests. He disappeared completely. Friends said the public reaction destroyed him. He tried to explain his side, and people turned it against him. Paul Monroe defended Henry publicly. Henry Brandon didn't kill my brother. Leslie did. Blaming Henry is ridiculous. He had every right to end a relationship that wasn't working. No one is obligated to marry someone just because they dated for a long time. But the damage was done. Henry's name would forever be connected to this case, not as a perpetrator, but as the man whose rejection supposedly triggered everything. It wasn't fair, but it was reality. Before you go, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications. We've got more cases coming. Stories about family betrayals, about murders that no one saw coming, about people who seemed normal until they weren't. Drop a comment and tell us what you thought. Do you think Sandra deserved 15 years? Was Henry partly responsible? We read every comment. Share this video. Someone needs to hear this story. Someone needs to understand the warning signs. If you've got a case you want us to cover, tell us in the comments. If it's twisted enough, we'll investigate it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.